Hollywood keeps throwing blockbuster money at sci-fi movies audiences refuse to treat like events. From superhero spin-offs to legacy sequels, from passion projects to streaming megabets, the last few years have delivered shockingly expensive misses. These films had stars, brands, massive budgets, and studio confidence, but when the numbers arrived, the future looked less like a dream and more like a financial warning. Good luck, have fun, don't die. 2026. Some sci-fi flops collapse because the idea is weak. This one collapsed even though the idea was dangerously clever. Good luck, have fun, don't die had a hook that sounded built for a cult following. A strange man from the future walks into a Los Angeles diner and tries to recruit ordinary people for a mission against a coming artificial intelligence threat. That setup feels timely, paranoid, funny, and perfectly tuned to an audience already uneasy about technology taking control. With Sam Rockwell's unpredictable screen energy, this should have been the kind of weird sci-fi thriller people discover, quote, and recommend. But clever ideas do not automatically sell tickets. With a reported budget around $20 million, the film made only about half that worldwide. The problem was visibility. It lacked franchise power, massive marketing noise, and a clean mainstream identity. In a crowded marketplace, strange movies need loud word of mouth, fast. Without it, even smart sci-fi can vanish. Mercy, 2026. A Chris Pratt sci-fi thriller should not feel like a secret, but Mercy almost entered theaters unnoticed. The premise had real commercial power, a near-future world where artificial intelligence becomes involved in human justice. That is not just science fiction. It connects directly to modern fears about machines judging people, replacing human decisions, and turning life into data. With Chris Pratt and Rebecca Ferguson attached, this should have felt like a sleek, tense, star-driven thriller with a strong hook. Instead, Mercy felt strangely quiet. Its reported budget was around $60 million, but its global box office failed to reach the level a film that size needed. The January release window did not help, because audiences often treat that period as a danger zone for films studios are not pushing aggressively. The marketing never felt unavoidable, the buzz never became urgent, and reviews did not rescue it. The cruel part is that Mercy had the right fear at the right time, but it never turned that fear into theatrical demand. Madam Web, 2024. Before many viewers even saw Madam Web, the internet had already turned it into a warning sign. Sony's Spider-Man adjacent universe was supposed to expand with mystery, psychic visions, and a fresh, female-led comic book angle. The film had superhero branding, sci-fi elements, and a connection to one of the most recognizable comic universes in the world. On paper, that should have created curiosity. In reality, audiences sensed trouble early. The trailers were mocked, the dialogue became meme material, and the movie's identity felt confused. Was it a superhero origin story, a psychic thriller, a franchise setup, or just another attempt to stretch the Spider-Man brand without Spider-Man? That uncertainty hurt badly. With a reported budget around $80 million, Madam Web made about $100 million worldwide, which sounds decent until marketing costs and theater splits are counted. The larger damage was reputational. Audiences were tired of superhero side stories that felt like franchise homework. Madam Web proved that a comic book connection can create online noise without selling enough tickets. The Bride, 2026. Some movies are too strange for the mainstream, but The Bride was too expensive to survive being strange. Maggie Gyllenhaal's gothic reimagining of the Bride of Frankenstein myth was not built like a safe studio product. It had prestige ambition, visual boldness, an unusual tone, and a high-concept style designed to divide viewers. That kind of artistic gamble can work when the budget is controlled. But when the reported cost sits around $80 million, every creative risk becomes financially dangerous. The theatrical result was brutal. The film earned only a fraction of what it needed worldwide, turning its boldness into a business problem. Audiences seemed unsure what they were being sold. Was it horror, romance, sci-fi fantasy, art house drama, or a monster movie with prestige packaging? That confusion may attract curious viewers, but it can also push casual audiences away. The sad part is that The Bride may gain defenders later. Ambitious failures often age better than safe hits. But theaters count seats, not future cult status. Greenland 2, Migration 2026. The comet was not the only disaster here. The real mistake was assuming pandemic-era home viewing success would become theatrical demand. The first Greenland found its audience during an unusual marketplace, when premium digital rentals and at-home viewing changed how movies survived. That made the sequel look safer than it really was. Greenland 2, Migration, brought back Gerard Butler, expanded the scale, and carried a reported budget around $90 million. But theatrical audiences did not respond with the urgency the studio needed. The film earned far below what a production of that size required, turning it into a serious commercial disappointment. Disaster movies depend on event energy. Viewers need to feel the destruction is too big, too loud, and too immediate to wait for streaming. Greenland 2 had global danger on screen, but the cultural heat was missing. The issue was not that audiences reject survival thrillers. The issue was that this sequel felt more like a continuation than a must-see event. It became a warning. Not every streaming-era success can migrate safely to theaters.
Kraven the Hunter, 2024. By the time Kraven the Hunter finally arrived, audiences had already stopped hunting for Sony's Spider-Man side universe. The film was supposed to bring a rougher, more primal energy to the superhero space. It had action, animalistic mythology, and a recognizable comic book name. But it also arrived after years of audience fatigue around Spider-Man-adjacent movies that did not actually feature Spider-Man. That was the central problem. Venom survived because it had personality, chaos, and a strange monster buddy appeal. But after Morbius and Madame Web, trust in the universe had weakened badly. Kraven carried a reported budget well above $100 million, yet its worldwide gross landed far below what a superhero action film needs to justify itself. The numbers made it look less like a risky experiment and more like the end of an exhausted strategy. Delays, weak reviews, and an unclear audience hook only made things worse. Viewers were not convinced this character demanded a theatrical origin story. Kraven the Hunter wanted to feel savage. Instead, it felt like the final warning sign. The Running Man 2025, a famous title, a dystopian hook, and a modern action star still could not outrun audience indifference. The Running Man should have been a strong sci-fi action package. The basic idea is still powerful. A future society turns survival into entertainment, and a man is forced into a deadly public spectacle controlled by media, money, and power. That kind of premise feels more relevant now than ever. Reality television, streaming outrage, algorithmic fame, the world almost caught up with the nightmare. But relevance did not turn into ticket sales. The film carried a reported $110 million production budget and earned only around $69 million worldwide. Its opening also came in below expectations, with reports noting that it was beaten globally by Now You See Me, Now You Don't during its debut frame. That is a tough image for a dystopian action movie trying to feel like a must-see event. The problem may have been familiarity. Audiences understood the premise, but they did not feel a burning need to see this version in theaters. It had the ingredients of a sharp modern remake, but not the urgency. In the end, The Running Man did not just lose the game, it lost the crowd. Borderlands 2024. This was not just a flop. This was a franchise adaptation crashing almost on contact. Borderlands had the recognizable video game name, the chaotic sci-fi wasteland, the strange weapons, the loud attitude, and a cast full of famous faces. It should have had at least some built-in curiosity from gamers and action fans. Instead, it arrived feeling strangely late, oddly mismatched, and disconnected from what made the games feel energetic in the first place. The numbers were punishing. With a reported $115 million budget, Borderlands earned only about one-third of that worldwide. That is disastrous for a movie that clearly wanted to launch or revive a screen franchise. The opening weekend was especially damaging because it suggested audiences had already made their decision before word of mouth could even help. The film looked expensive, but expensive is not the same as exciting. Video game movies have improved in recent years because studios finally learned to respect fan expectations. Borderlands felt like a reminder of the older mistake, assuming a loud property automatically becomes a loud hit. Instead, it became one of 2024's clearest examples of brand recognition without audience trust. Mickey 17, 2025. Sometimes a movie can be respected, discussed, even admired, and still be too expensive to survive. Mickey 17 came with a serious pedigree. Bong Joon-ho had the kind of post-Parasite reputation most directors dream of. Robert Pattinson had rebuilt himself into a risk-taking leading man, and the premise was pure philosophical sci-fi. An expendable worker gets repeatedly regenerated for dangerous missions. It was strange, satirical, darkly funny, and exactly the kind of original sci-fi many viewers claim they want Hollywood to make. But originality does not erase cost. The film carried a reported $118 million production budget and earned only a little above that worldwide. Early coverage also questioned its path to profitability because the budget was so high and marketing costs had to be considered. That makes Mickey 17 a fascinating kind of flop. Not a hated disaster, but a financial mismatch. It may have been too odd for mainstream crowds and too expensive for the niche audience most likely to embrace it. The lesson is harsh. Hollywood says it wants original sci-fi, but when original sci-fi is priced like a franchise tentpole, it has almost no room to breathe.
Megalopolis, 2024. This is the kind of failure that feels almost mythological. One legendary filmmaker, one dream project, and one catastrophic public rejection. Megalopolis was never going to be ordinary. Francis Ford Coppola spent decades trying to bring this massive, futuristic vision to the screen, and the final result arrived as a strange, ambitious, divisive sci-fi epic about power, civilization, time, and collapse. It was the opposite of safe studio product. It was personal, grand, and defiantly unusual. But the financial result was devastating. IMDb lists the film with an estimated $120 million budget and a worldwide gross of about $14.4 million. Box Office Mojo shows just how small the domestic run was, with only about $7.6 million in North America. That is not just a disappointment. That is a massive gap between ambition and audience demand. The tragedy is that Megalopolis may remain culturally discussed for years precisely because it was so strange. But commercial cinema is not judged by future essays alone. It is judged by whether people buy tickets when the movie arrives. And in 2024, one of cinema's boldest passion projects became one of sci-fi's most brutal financial collapses. Elio, 2025. Pixar once made original ideas feel unstoppable. Elio showed how hard that magic has become to sell theatrically. This was not a cynical sequel or a tired reboot. It was an original animated sci-fi adventure about a boy swept into an intergalactic journey, forced to navigate alien worlds, cosmic misunderstandings, and questions of identity. On paper, that sounds exactly like the kind of emotional, imaginative story Pixar built its reputation on, but the marketplace had changed. Elio carried a reported $150 million budget and finished around $154 million worldwide, almost equal to production cost before marketing expenses. Reports also noted that it opened below expectations and became one of Pixar's weakest theatrical openings, with competition and the post-pandemic challenge for original animated films working against it. That is the real pain here. Elio was not an ugly failure. It had charm, color, and a family-friendly sci-fi hook. But audiences have become more selective about what animation they rush to see in theaters, especially when original stories do not have sequel familiarity. The result was a soft landing for a movie that needed a cosmic launch. For Pixar, that is not just a flop. It is a warning about the future of original animation.
The Marvels, 2023. The universe did not shrink, the audience did. The Marvels arrived carrying one of the biggest brands in modern Hollywood. 3 superpowered leads, cosmic action, bright visuals, and the massive expectation that anything connected to the Marvel Cinematic Universe could still pull crowds by default. But this film became a brutal sign that even superhero sci-fi needs more than a logo to survive. After years of interconnected stories, multiverse teases, streaming homework, and uneven franchise momentum, many casual viewers simply felt exhausted before the movie even arrived. The problem was not only the film itself, it was the weight around it. Audiences had to care about Captain Marvel, Ms. Marvel, Monica Rambeau, Kree politics, cosmic mythology, and the wider MCU direction all at once. For hardcore fans, that might sound exciting. For everyone else, it sounded like homework with laser beams. With a reported budget above $200 million, the Marvels earned around $206 million worldwide, which made it one of Marvel's most painful theatrical disappointments. The shocking part is that it looked colorful, fast, and energetic, but it did not feel essential. The Marvels proved that even the biggest cinematic universe can lose altitude when audiences stop believing every chapter matters.
Furiosa, a Mad Max saga, 2024. The engines roared, the critics respected it, the images were massive. And still, the box office could not catch fire. Furiosa, a Mad Max saga, was the kind of film that looked designed for the biggest screen possible. It had George Miller's world-building, post-apocalyptic spectacle, desert warfare, mythic character drama, and the impossible burden of following Mad Max Fury Road, one of the most celebrated action films of the modern era. In creative terms, it had prestige. In financial terms, it had a mountain to climb. The production budget was reported at $168 million, while worldwide box office reached about $174 million. The franchise data from The Numbers shows the same painful comparison. Fury Road made far more globally, while Furiosa stalled despite its scale. That is not enough for a movie this expensive. The issue was not quality alone. It may have been timing, character familiarity, and the challenge of selling a prequel without the same central star energy audiences remembered. Furiosa proved that critical admiration and visual ambition do not always equal mainstream urgency. It may age well. It may build a loyal following. But during its theatrical run, this wasteland epic burned through money faster than momentum.
Tron Aries 2025. A glowing digital world returned with a giant price tag, but the audience response flickered instead of exploding. Tron Aries had every reason to look like a major studio bet. It carried a legacy sci-fi brand, a visually recognizable universe, a sleek cyber-future identity, and the promise of bringing Tron back for a new generation. But legacy can be dangerous. It creates nostalgia, yes, but it also raises the question Hollywood hates most. How many people were actually waiting for this? The production budget was reported at $180 million, while the worldwide box office landed around $142 million. Box Office Mojo also listed the same worldwide range across its market breakdowns. That already looks bad before marketing is included, but the larger reported loss estimates made it look even worse. Some industry coverage projected that the film could lose Disney over $130 million once total costs were considered. The problem was simple but deadly. The film looked expensive, but it did not feel essential. In modern Hollywood, a legacy sequel cannot just remind people that a brand exists. It has to convince them that the return matters now. Tron Aries lit up the screen, but not the box office.
The Electric State, 2025.
The biggest sci-fi disaster on this list did not need a theatrical flop to become infamous. It only needed a budget so enormous that disappointment became the story. The Electric State was a Netflix production, so it does not belong in the same box office category as theatrical bombs. There is no normal worldwide gross to compare against its cost, but as a streaming sci-fi gamble, it is impossible to ignore. This was a giant retro-futuristic adventure with major stars, massive effects, and the Russo brothers behind the camera. It was supposed to feel like a streaming blockbuster with theatrical scale. Instead, the budget became the headline. Reports placed the cost as high as $320 million, making it one of the most expensive films ever produced. Business Insider also identified The Electric State as Netflix's most expensive production in a broader discussion of high-budget films with weak reception. That is why it ranks at number 1. It did not bomb because ticket buyers rejected it at the box office. It became a disaster because the spending was so huge that the movie needed to become a cultural event just to justify itself. And it did not. In a world where streaming platforms chase attention like oxygen, The Electric State proved that even $300 million cannot guarantee impact. So which disaster shocked you most? The streaming mega-bet of The Electric State, the glowing collapse of Tron, Aries, the painful fall of Furiosa, or the Star Wars warning sign hiding in plain sight? Sci-fi is supposed to show us the future, but these films revealed something colder. Hollywood can still spend like audiences are guaranteed. If you want more brutal box office breakdowns, like, share, subscribe, and tell me which flop deserved number 1.